Hi again. This is the last video for this section. This section is a little more complicated, so it just took a little bit longer to teach everything I needed to teach. And so now we're going to be solving compound inequalities. And you'll notice how they're written with the y in the middle or the x in the middle. And you can kind of think of them as three-part inequalities. If I read this, here's how we read it. That says y is greater than or equal to 2 and y is less than or equal to 5. So basically y is just between those two numbers. And on the first one I read that backward. Notice that it's open toward the y, so it's y is greater than 2 and y is less than or equal to 5. On the graph, when we graph it, we just go from 2 to 5. Right? Greater than or equal to 2 and less than or equal to 5. That means that the solution set is between and including these two numbers because it's or equal to. So that's what it looks like on the graph. And then in the interval notation, I simply put 2, 5. Oh gosh, if only I could write a 5. And the bracket, of course. And so that's it. On these, we didn't really have to solve anything. We just had to go ahead and graph them. So on the next one, this one says x is greater than -1, greater than -1, and less than or equal to 4. And then it's everything in between. Make sure you put the line there. Even though the parentheses and the brackets indicate there should be a line, be sure that you actually put the line. And then it's -1 to 4. Parenthesis on -1, bracket on 4. All right, next we are going to solve this. Now, we solve this just like any other inequality, but we have to solve on 3 parts. So anything you do to the middle to isolate the 5x or to isolate the x, you'll do on both sides. So I'm going to begin by adding 6. Right, I added 6 in the middle to get rid of -6. On the left, I'll have 10. It's less than or equal to 5x, which is less than 25. Then we're going to divide everything by 5 because the term in the middle is 5x and we want it to just be x, 1x. So we divide by 5. And we get this compound inequality. Right? X is greater than or equal to 2 and x is less than 5. So when we graph this once again, it's going to go in between these two numbers, right? We put a bracket on the 2 because the less than or equal, or it's really greater than or equal to is on the 2, and the less than is on the 5. Put the line in between. And interval notation is from 2 to 5, and you have to make sure you put the appropriate bracket or parenthesis in the right place. All right, I believe this is the last problem on this section. So we have to distribute 2 in the middle. So that's going to be 2 times x plus 2 times 4 is 8, and that's less than or equal to 8. To solve, we're going to subtract 8 and then divide by 2. So subtract 8 3 times. Remember, it's a compound inequality, so that's why we have to subtract 3 times. Now this happens to be a 0, but don't discard that 0. It's important. It's going to stay. And 0 as part of our solution set is perfectly fine. Okay, so here's our compound inequality. X is less than or equal to 0 and greater than or equal to -13/2. When you put this on the graph, since we don't really have to find a location, you can just leave it as -13/2. But if you're trying to do this problem on MyMathLab, you're usually selecting the graph, so you would need to know that that is -6.5 to kind of figure out the location. So I'm going to have brackets on both of these. Whoops. -13/2 and a bracket at 0 and then the line in between them. That is all we have to do on the graph. In interval notation, it's negative 13 halves to 0. Remember, 0 is just a number, and it stays. And so this is the end of chapter 2.